This is Progressive Insider.
Yeah, Progressive Insider, you know they wiser. Ooh, this that new media company covering everything. I'm talking that news you ain't heard of, cause you know it's getting buried. Social justice, yeah, the stuff you need to know about. Fucking politics that the corporate news won't cover. You know they don't think that you could see under, but you can now, cause the people we cover.
All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Hair of the Dog, Friday, March 20th. I am Kerri Barber, and I'm here with the lovely and talented Andy Kennedy. Good morning, Andy.
Good morning, my dear. How are you doing this morning?
I'm so tired. For people who don't know, I'm on, I think it's day 5 now, where I've been sick. And my husband is home with me. He was quarantining against his will, but now he's sick. And he just got a coworker sent him a message from work saying that they had people come in with hazmat suits and do a cleaning of this one particular area. He works in a very big office, and this one area got sprayed down because somebody inevitably tested positive. They had just come back from traveling from a hot zone. So here's the problem. They sprayed down one area. What about the common areas like restrooms and all the doorknobs and the hallways and the cafeteria? And he works in a secure building like most people, where everybody has to pass through the same door and the same checkpoint. What about those people? Right? So just the way that people are handling this is just so ass backwards. So what that does for us now is we can point to him being sick, and we actually have a case now where there is a known test positive. So the problem that I have had this week, most people don't know this. They assume that once you test positive, you're golden, you are totally taken care of. And that is not the case. So in my situation, I couldn't point to a positive case. So my doctor, and I talked to him for a long time, he was really upset because he's like, because we can't point to a case, I can't order a test for you. And he's like, you've got all the symptoms. It's likely you've got it. You've got all the symptoms. But the way he explained it is like, look, test or no test, unless your fever is really high and you're having problems with cognitive ability, or you're having trouble breathing, we'd send you home. And he's like, you're already home. You're already doing everything that you should be doing. So you're just not going to get counted in this.
Yeah, good for you. You're doing it right, Kerri. I'm so proud of you.
Yeah, but the rest of this conversation, my doctor is hilarious. He's like, he has no chill, no PC whatsoever. And he was like, I'm actually here and I'm bored because my vacation got canceled and all my appointments canceled. So I'm just sitting here reading over the protocols. And he was, really, really frustrated because he said, I have no masks for me and my staff. I have no gear, nothing. And all I can do is sit here and wait for one of my patients to call and say, I need to go to the ER. He's like, that's what I'm doing now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nothing proactive. And he knows that what's coming for him and for the rest of his team. And he works at a really big hospital group. They're just kind of waiting.
Yes.
So,
the calm before the storm.
Right. So yeah, with the 2 to 3 week incubation and presentment of symptoms, and then just waiting to see which of his patients are not going to make it, is basically where he's at.
Right. And it's kind of scary because it's the waiting period, right? We're now done with spring break, right? Where there was a giant Corona festival in Florida.
Yes.
Right. Brought to you by Corona Beer. And so now all of those kids were exposed to the virus because none of them knew that they had, because this is very new in the United States and it really hasn't even gone past the incubation period. So now all of those kids will disperse back to their home areas and spread the virus further. We are looking at a total meltdown of systems in about 2 weeks. It's all going to hit at once. And that's really scary. What are you going to do about it? There's nothing you can. It's waiting for the storm to arrive.
Yeah. And so for anyone who missed our previous shows, Andy's wife she's a nurse. Is that correct?
She's a scrub nurse in the OR of the local hospital. But because all elective surgeries have been canceled at the hospital to minimize the number of people going out in public, she's been redeployed to the screening area at the main entrance of the hospital to screen people to see if there's a chance that they could possibly have coronavirus. So she's got the full hazmat protective type equipment on, and she's greeting people at the front as they come in. And if they have to answer 3 questions, and they are to do with travel and to do with how they're feeling. So first of all, it relies on people being truthful, right? There is a special area for those people to go to if they answer yes to any of the 3 questions, right? And so they go to this corona area, and then they're further assessed by other staff. And then once that's occurred, if it's deemed that they could possibly be infected, then they're taken to a entirely sealed off portion of the hospital. So they've got it set up actually quite well. But the problem is that your screeners are susceptible because they are interacting with everyone coming into the hospital, right? And so that's the scary part of it. I've had to go and get my trailer that we use in the summer out of storage early to set up a safe zone for her to live in while this is all happening, because potentially she could be bringing it home with her in some way. And so my daughter and I and the dogs are here in the house, and my wife is living in the driveway in the trailer, and we're have to stay, with 10 feet apart. I can't go to the trailer. I can't use her car. She can't use my truck. She can't come in the house or have any interaction with us or the dogs.
So how is that working now? Maybe I'm telling too much of your business here, so stop me if I'm wrong, but your daughter came home from college and then immediately decided, well, I'm home, I'm on vacation, I'm going to go hang out with friends. Doesn't that now break the, kind of break the seal on this quarantine safe zone that you've worked so hard to prepare?
Well, when I pressed her on where she was going to a friend's house. She was going to hang out at this person's house, and it was her friend was there and her friend's mother, and they have been self-isolating as well. So we kind of figured that, all right, so if this is the only thing, and then I got her to promise that she wasn't going to do this any longer, right? So it was the one night she came home. It is what it is. She's 20, far be it for me to tell her what to do. But it wasn't as if she went to a rave, right? She didn't go to Coachella. So there's obviously, I had a very tough night last night. I was very anxious last night. It was all the news coming in. I was restless. I was pacing. I got on Messenger and was reaching out to people I hadn't talked to in a while, just to touch base and make sure people were self-isolating and doing okay. And I'm feeling much better this morning. But
isn't that a remarkable thing, right? So here we are self-isolating, but we're using technology to reach out to people, relatives, friends, people maybe we haven't talked to in a while. This particular moment, there's always a silver lining. And I hate to go back to this phrase, but it's so true. We are at our best when things are at their worst. So you're starting to see Now, we initially saw, the toilet paper war and all of these things and people hoarding. I get that. But then the next wave that comes out is all of these remarkable things that people are doing to help each other, to check in, to build those connections. So we're starting to see more of those stories come out. And I appreciate, the technology, like we're able to do this morning show and get some information out and have conversations. But more than that, what I've seen on Facebook is, number one, everybody's got a sense of humor, which is awesome. We absolutely need this for part of that self-care.
Mm-hmm.
But then watching all of these homeopathic remedies come through. And there was a gentleman who had one, I'm not sure where he's at, but he pulled out an old school remedy that I remember doing when I was a kid. When you get the pot of water on the stove with like oranges and different scents in it, and then you put your head over it with a towel on your head, and you basically are doing your own sauna to help clear the nasal passages and things like. I'm like, yeah, I remember doing that. And
of course,
while it's not a cure, but remind people of all of these things that we can use at home with $0. Right?
Exactly, because that's what's going to take, right? As Congress and the Senate argue about false scarcity and how to best help people without losing that narrative that they've built up for the last 50 years, ultimately the American people are going to have to look after themselves, right? That we're going to have to reach out in our communities, make sure the most vulnerable of us are taken care of, right? And that's going to happen on a local level. That's going to happen on your street. My buddy Steve that lives just down the road here, he's a chef, right? He's semi-retired now, but he's spent his days cooking food for friends and taking food to shelters into the food bank, right? Making himself, scavenging as many pieces of Tupperware as he can and taking food out to people, armed with a mask and gloves and just dropping food off in people's driveways for them, right? But that's how you get through this. And that's how you make a contribution, right? Like I think that, and this will eventually lead into the good things about the coronavirus segment that I planned, right? Tongue in cheek, of course, but this is going to show people that they still have their humanity intact, despite the situations that we currently find ourselves in our countries, right? And that's a positive thing.
Yeah, and let's go back to the point that you raised about this false narrative of forced austerity. So, and I actually came across a Facebook post, and I put it on my Facebook page, where someone had written about, wait a second, do you mean that we have always had the ability to have pregnant and sick and disabled people work from home, and just now you're bringing this out? We've always had the ability to limit interest rates for students and to give debt forgiveness to all of these other areas. And maybe we don't shut off your electricity and your water right away when you're in crisis. And she just went through this entire list of things that are happening right now that we could have always been doing and just hadn't, because it wasn't profitable and there wasn't enough social awareness and a big enough push for this. And it really brings these things to light. So one of the things that has come out is we've been watching Congress. Okay, so I'm not going to hate on people with money, but we do need to recognize that when you're in a certain economic standing, you no longer have the awareness, or you forget, or you never knew what regular people go through, right? So we have millionaires in Congress who are fighting over whether we can get crumbs to help sustain us. So the original proposal was $500. Well, $500 is going to go pretty quick. I don't care who you are. when you're trying to feed a family and get resources. And the biggest thing that we can do is make sure that we're eating properly, right? If you can't get fresh fruits and vegetables, you go to the frozen food section. That still costs money for a family that you are going to feed breakfast, lunch, and dinner and whatever else every day. So 500 is nothing, but they were fighting over that. And then it went up. So right now what we have is in Congress, Wednesday, they passed a package for people, but there's so many caveats on this package that we really need to pay attention to it and read it. So what I found is they have a cash benefit that is coming for individuals and families up to $1,200 per family, depending on if you're under 75,000 per year, you're going to get the maximum benefit, and then you lose a portion of it the higher your income goes. So this benefit should be coming within the next 3 weeks. There's a maximum of it, so it's every adult and every child up to, I think, 3,500. Don't quote me on that, but so like my household, we'd be eligible for 2,000, which is helpful. But now let's add in the fact that my husband's home, and he is fortunate enough to have paid time off, but he doesn't have enough stored. I mean, it's March. His rollover started in January. He doesn't have enough earned benefit to cover all of the time off that they're telling him he needs to take to be responsible. So those are days that are unpaid for him to be home, which affects every bill that we have, you know, that's coming. We've got mortgage and we've got electric and all of these other things, just like everybody else. But the key caveat here on this unemployment thing is it covers companies with 500 employees or less, right? So you've got this cash benefit plus an unemployment benefit in this bill. So let's think about that. Off the top of your head, a company with more than 500 employees is going to be a United Healthcare, a Boeing, any of the defense companies, but it also includes like Kelly Services. Mm-hmm. If you're a temporary worker, whose logo's on your check? It's probably not your company, your small company, or whoever you work for. You actually work for like a Kelly Services. So we have millions of people who may be caught because they added this provision to it, 500 employees or less. And so now we've got all these gig economy workers, all these temporary workers who may be outside of that benefit and not be eligible for the unemployment payment.
Well, and who's the biggest employers in the United States? Huge multinational corporations, right? Like Amazon, Walmart, right? Does this help them?
No, because they've got too many employees.
Yeah. So the problem is that the neoliberal regime that has been dismantling the US economy for the common folk for the last 50 years now has to find a way to save the American economy without losing the scarcity narrative that they've spent 5 decades building up, right? We've always, we've always looked to, in the States, you have to look to the market to solve all your problems. The private sector always looks to the market to solve every problem. The market cannot solve this problem. When you live in a neoliberal society, when you have a natural disaster or a pandemic or something of this nature, the market can't fix it.
No, you're absolutely right. And I think in this case, when you have basically what is termed in insurance speak, an act of God. So it wasn't just a virus. I was talking to Don Ford yesterday. Did you know we had a number of pretty sizable earthquakes in the United States yesterday and the day before? Oh yeah. So I guess California, I forget where he said, but there was the San Andreas, and then up by Yellowstone there was a shutter, and then over in the East Coast, I think he said South Carolina, North Carolina, we get all those fracking tremors. So across the United States, on top of
Yeah, there's fracking tremors everywhere.
right. So Don actually had someone on there who's got an interesting program. He interviewed a guy, Ron Gavlik out of Pennsylvania, who is right now working on an anti-fracking coalition.
Right.
Because you have all of these natural resources that are being affected. Like he said last night that the groundwater and the drinking water was being affected and contaminated by these chemicals. So, all right, so we've got this pandemic. We've got people who have scarcity issues for resources needed to survive. They're not working. And oh, by the way, this water has been contaminated with these chemicals. And this is happening right here in Pennsylvania, right? So, so you have all of these things coalescing around the American family right now today, and to your point, it has the effect of tearing down the policies and all the political speak that we have dealt with for what, 4 or 5 decades now.
Yeah, basically since Nixon.
Yeah,
right,
exactly. So so that interview, I think we'll have that out today, if not today, tomorrow. So I would encourage people to check that out. But so yeah, so we go back to the interview that we posted with Warren Mosler, and then all of these things where the money that we have, the deficit itself is a measure of what we invested in, right? So it's just like our savings account, our personal savings account. This is what we invest our money in. And now is the time where we could take that money, that in our wealth as a nation, and invest in the thing that is most important, which is our people, right? That's what we should be doing. So while they're arguing, do we get a $500 benefit or $1,000 benefit? And how often do we disperse it? Is it one time, or are we going to do it 2 or 3 times? This is where the money should be going, because without the health and safety of the American worker, the country as a whole has no value, right? It goes away. And this is, I think this is the truth that you were getting to. We always said it was the job creators at the top. No, those job creators are sitting at home, where the people who actually prove their value every day are the doctors, the nurses, our teachers, all of these people who are now greatly affected by what's going on. That's where we put our money and our investment.
It's yeah, it's insane. They're going to have to understand at some point that it's not going to work, right? That this, while they argue about it and the economy goes to hell in a bucket, they're going to have to inject, money to fix the problem, right? Like people already have seen. Now this is it's a little bit different, and it's not quite the way that people were describing it. But when the Fed injected 1.5 trillion in the market, okay, that was just one of the limited things that the Fed has the ability to do as an option to curtail a crashing market, right? When that system started to crash last week, right? That 1.5 billion isn't necessarily can be considered new spending, but it's in place for a temporary stopgap to stop the market from completely bottoming out, right? But again, was 1.5 and then another 700 billion, so $2.2 trillion of value that people absolutely have not had explained to them how it's been paid for, right? We're willing to save corporations with $2.2 trillion over a week. And we're arguing about how much people should be able to get to eat.
Yeah, so we're going back to the die quietly argument, right? So that's effectively what we're talking about. Let's cut all the polite rhetoric and really get to the meaning of what people are saying. What they're actually discussing is how much money should we invest in people to keep some people from dying? What are we willing to do? And that is the core of the argument. So I was able to find this morning statistics on the number of workers, private sector workers, who do not have paid sick leave, right? So this does not include your state employee, your state legislature, your federal employee, or members of Congress. They get paid sick leave. So these are just private sector workers, that free market. And I'm going to see if I can share this real quick so that people can see these numbers. So the scope of what we are actually talking about. So if you can see on the screen here, now this is, it's from 2013, the last time a comprehensive study was done. So that should tell you something. So across these, you've got the number of private sector workers and then workers without paid sick leave to give you the percentage. So we're talking about millions of people. So in Alabama alone, 600,000 people do not have paid sick leave. So during a time when we're telling people that you must stay home for 2 weeks, 600,000 people right now today have zero income coming in. So down here in Illinois, down here, we've got 2 million people. Now, our governor has shut down things like restaurants and bars and required that you can't have more than 10 people in a gathering, which is supposed to include your employer. But I can tell you right now, my son is going to work every day, and they're basically relying on the janitorial staff to keep everybody safe. So he doesn't have paid sick leave. So he's among that 2 million people mark right there. So 44% estimated right now today in Illinois have no paid sick leave. And most of these are now without income. So we're struggling. We're literally having a struggle in Congress to decide if these people are worth $500, $1,000, or maybe more, or if we're willing to let them die and just invest in body bags.
That was going to be my point. Is I think that the government, that's how they determine your value, right? How much money does it cost the government to cart away your dead carcass?
Yeah.
Right? Up to that point, if it's still worth it for them to take care of your sorry ass, they will, right? But if it all of a sudden is less money to just take away your dead carcass, then why would they help people?
Yeah.
Clearly, they've shown over the last 5 decades that they don't care about people. And I always use, the same argument that if they actually truly cared about people in the United States, Flint, Michigan would have clean drinking water after 5 years. You would think
it's been longer than that. It's been longer than that. The Flint issue started in 2014 and 15. So, and they're still dealing with it. So you bring up a good point. Now in Flint and other parts of Michigan and Detroit, they have the highest water prices in the country. So you have this, in Flint in particular, where you had a number of layoffs and things like this, they had this water issue, but they still were getting billed for water. So that has continued today. If they don't pay that bill, then their water gets shut off. The minute their water gets shut off, Detroit, Flint, all of these places, they are now fast-tracked for foreclosure. It used to take a number of years to foreclose on a home, but because of new laws that went into effect, it is now a matter of months. And so you not only have this high water bill, water that you still cannot drink, you will lose your home. And what they do is they have a blight remediation program, a quasi-governmental agency that helps take these foreclosed homes and resell them. It used to be that you could only resell them to people who live in the state or in the area. 2 years ago, they lifted that. So now I, in Chicago, could buy a bunch of houses, pennies on the dollar, in Flint, Michigan, and turn them into rentals and just be a landlord for Flint. So all of these issues now that we've been talking about for years are all coming to a head because of one small virus that turned into a pandemic that literally has exposed all of these weaknesses in policy and thought and the way that we invest our money as a country. So
yeah, you see videos coming from the UK of people walking into, you know, corner stores or grocery stores and taking pictures of a single roll of toilet paper that costs 10 pounds. Right? Capitalism at its finest. We hear stories of the health industry in the United States saying that we need to be upping the cost of these medicines so that the corporations can make the money they're currently losing, make it back.
Yeah, well, that's so most people don't understand that the public finances the research and development, and then we hand that over to a private company to develop and manufacture
and exploit it.
Yeah, well, here's where the supply chain gets a little bit wonky in a time like this. So we source the majority of our core materials for all medications from China.
Yes.
Yeah, it's about 90. I think that the last statistic I looked up a few months ago was 92% of all source materials come from China. Another few comes from India. So those source materials are sourced from China, shipped to India, where they are all manufactured. So this is your Humira, your Plavix, Eliquis. All of these drugs are manufactured in India. We have a couple that are made in the US, and those are mostly for thyroid, or we have one diabetic that's made here actually in Illinois. The rest of them are all in India, and then they're labeled. So you've got the generic labels, you've got these branded labels, and they're shipped around the world from India. So now we have this pandemic that is hitting India pretty hard. It's hitting China pretty hard. It's affecting all of the supply chains because we don't manufacture in country anymore. We've all outsourced it to India. You're going to have an issue now. I would say probably within the next 3 months, if the supply chain issue is not addressed fully, you're going to see an issue where these life-saving medications are now either going to go up in cost or just not be available for the people who need them. So you've got the virus, you've got this pandemic, you've got food issues and scarcity issues, and then next you're going to see shortages on these medications that come in. So it's a domino effect.
Yes. If it couldn't have worked out better for the coronavirus, if you wanted to maximize casualties, right? They started in the place where most of the manufacturing occurs for everything, right? Because of the free trade agreements that have been, you know, installed forever. And so it's going to disrupt all of the production of everything right when, you know, the rest of the world needs it. Right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So when Bernie Sanders was just on doing his broadcast last week, and he was calling for a World War II effort, and this is what he was talking about. So for people who could not put the abstract together, what he was talking about is we took a manufacturing facility like Ford. It was making cars, and we retooled them to make tanks because it was it was an easier transition for that manufacturing facility to do that. We still have manufacturers that can retool here for pharmaceuticals and all of these other necessary materials. Here in Chicago, we have AbbVie and Abbott who make medical equipment. My son works at a company that makes bandages and things like that. So my question to his employer would be, well, you're making bandages. Can you make these N95 masks? Can you retool in the next 2 weeks to make these masks and start producing them right here in this country so we reduce that supply chain bottleneck that we have from a global market and start making them right here in the US to supply, because it's easier to load up a truck from Illinois and ship to the rest of the country than it is to wait for shipments from India and hope that they get here within the next few months to really make a difference.
Right, exactly. Did you hear the story about these people that were, during the crisis, were using a 3D printer to manufacture these valves that are needed for ventilators because the apparently the manufacturer couldn't make them fast enough? So they decided to take things into their own hands and make their own. And now that manufacturer is suing them.
Are you kidding? They're suing?
Yeah.
Oh, that's ridiculous. So your good deed is rewarded with a lawsuit. And this is one of those times where you would send them back a response to their lawsuit. You know, that little picture of the T-Rex in a baseball cap flipping them off. I'm just like, no, fuck you. Are you kidding me? What is wrong with you? So speaking of people doing stupid, so the story has come out that we have some of our illustrious Congress members who had a security briefing. They always get security briefings about upcoming threats and things like this. So it came out that January 24th, members of the Security Committee in Congress got briefed on coronavirus right around the time that we were calling it a hoax and a Democrat plot and all of these things. So they were getting this briefing about how serious it was. And then some of these members decided, oh, wait, I have millions of dollars of stock in some of these health companies, and I know that this is going to affect the stock market, because that was their conversation. Not how do we save lives, but how do we protect the stock market? And so these millionaire members of Congress decided, well, I'm going to protect my own ass, not my constituents, and I'm going to sell stock. So these are all, when a member of Congress sells stock, it's public. So people have gone back and seen two members of Congress in particular. I expect more will be coming. But Congressman Burr and Congresswoman Kelly Lakoff, I'll look up her last name, but these two in particular sold $1.3 million worth of stock within a few days.
Each.
Yeah, each.
Yes.
So
now hang on a second. They did selflessly tell some of their big dollar donors.
Right. So their donors were advised and protected. So good on them. So the comparison, if you want to go out to Twitter, the hashtag that I highly encourage you to look up is a hashtag lock them all up. So you can see the different pieces of information that's been put together. So Andy, like your folks self-printing these parts that they needed, here is Twitter and the Twitter family putting together all of the pieces and evidence. So it's Kelly Loeffler, Senator Kelly Loeffler, Richard Burr, Jim Inhofe, Ron Johnson, Richard Burr, and Kelly Loeffler. There's four of them who are being outed as insider traders
The numbers are going up like coronavirus victims.
That's what I'm saying. As this
could be a pandemic of insider trading.
Right. So, all of this information is public if you know where to look. And I fully expect the Twitter family to be pouring through data right now, looking at trades and all of these orders that have gone through after this briefing for senators. So yeah, I think, and you know what I think would be remarkable is if we could get them into jail fast enough, because they are famous, they could help detail the issues of coronavirus spread in our institutions like prisons, because we're not talking about that aspect of it. But of course, if you have somebody famous in jail, we'll listen to them. So they could be our inside correspondents on how corona is being treated on an institutional level.
Sure, they could tell us how Epstein's doing. You know, they could report on a number of things.
Right, exactly.
Right? Are steel bars an effective way of blocking the coronavirus?
I'm going to go with no, but maybe we need an inside scoop on that one. And I'm confident that they will be able to handle it.
That would be great. I think that the American people need to know.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
So it goes to, this was another Twitter story that was coming out about the difference between somebody who's famous and just a regular person in their ability to get tested. So you had like, what's her face? Kylie Jenner's mom. I try not to remember her name.
Okay, yeah, I know who you're speaking of.
So
Voldemort.
Yes, she was not symptomatic, but they were concerned. They were just so concerned about her health and well-being as a scion of social media that she got tested and she's fine. Meanwhile,
thank goodness.
Oh, right. So, you know, your dead ass and my dead ass, who nobody gives a shit about, we can't get tested at all. So it was interesting because while I love him to death, Idris Elba posted on his Twitter feed, I've been tested and I've tested positive and I'll keep you updated. I'm like, fuck you, Idris. I don't give a shit. You're going to be fine. I'm not worried about you. I'm worried about my neighbor down the street who doesn't have a fan base of 7 million people. I'm sorry. That's the reality where we're at. So
yes.
So my personal plea is, if you are a moneyed person, if you are a celebrity, if you have some sort of fame and access to resources that the general public doesn't have, please sit down. Please back the fuck up. Go sit down. We don't want to hear from you right now at all.
Yes.
At all. Unless you're volunteering at a food bank, or you're financing solar power, or paying somebody's mortgage for them,
or delivering food to seniors, or anything of that nature. Yeah.
Right.
We don't care.
Yeah.
You're using your valuable bandwidth.
Exactly. And air, honestly.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So this has kind of been, you would think it's the great equalizer, a virus, right? It'll go after everybody. It doesn't care if you're white, black, whatever, if you have money, you don't have money, but it's not, because we are preventing it from affecting these people who, for some reason, have more value than the average person.
Right? Exactly.
So I'm interested to see how this all plays out, because, you know, when we started this whole conversation, we talked about constructs of finance and social norms being questioned.
Yes.
How far are we going to go before these things get torn down completely?
Well, yes, and one of our colleagues posted, pictures of excerpts of a movie and said, should we start dressing like Mad Max now? Get our orders in, right? because, you know, they're going to run out of that too soon, right?
Well, anybody who's a fan of Halloween, we can make our costumes, right? I've got faux fur everywhere. Let me tell you, today I could dress like that.
Nice. Okay.
Well, we went to a Viking fire fest, so I've still got all that. I'm ready to go.
Excellent. So changing gears slightly, and the reason I bring this up is, and we could talk about this too if you want, but you know, with Tulsi now dividing the country further, right? And going her, you know, her speech on social media about, to Bernie, it's not me, it's you, right? We now have, and the reason I bring this up is just because of the sheer brilliance of it. After Tulsi announced that she was dropping out and going to endorse Biden, which makes absolutely no sense on any level, but regardless, we don't have to talk about that if you don't want to. But the one thing that I wanted to bring up was there was a CNN political analyst / New York Times reporter. I can't remember what his name was, but as soon as he found out that Tulsi had dropped out, he tweeted, Biden needs to hold a unity rally with Gabbard and HRC.
Did he say that?
Yes.
Oh.
Isn't that sound like a great idea?
Oh,
so let's
please.
So during a pandemic, let's get a whole bunch of people together, right, in a small area, and invite the person that made it possible for us to have Trump.
Okay, so let's step back from this idea just a little bit. All right, so the neoliberal mindset, these are the people who will talk about climate change but don't actually believe it and don't believe it'll affect them, are suggesting that Tulsi and Hillary Clinton and all of their peoples should get together with Joe Biden and have a unity rally. I'm for it. Let's do it. Because I'm going to sit back at home in quarantine and laugh my ass off about that shit.
I would invite one more person.
Okay. All right.
Tom Hanks.
Who's doing much better, right? Just so everybody knows, he's doing much better right now. They got full treatment.
All right. Then bring all your old tissues.
Yeah. Bring your old tissues. Yeah, I'm totally for it. I'm down with all of it. And okay, so let's go back to Tulsi. Tulsi endorsed Biden, and everybody went, oh, and I'm like, why are you surprised? I was not at all surprised. And they're like, why were you not surprised? I'm like, in what world was Tulsi a progressive, right? So it's just like the argument with Elizabeth Warren. She's a progressive. No, Elizabeth Warren adhered to some progressive ideals in this very narrow space, which I absolutely applaud. But when you move outside of that space, she was full bore neoliberal, didn't understand macroeconomics or how things works, and was a big fan of austerity and bootstrapping. So here you have Tulsi, and we knew who Tulsi was, but the biggest commendation that we had from the progressive movement about Tulsi is when she stepped down as vice chair, pointing out the hypocrisy that was going on in 2016. When she took a stand, we absolutely applauded that because that is part of the progressive movement. You are supposed to stand up, even if no one else is standing up, and you're supposed to go, this ain't right. This isn't ethical. This is not how we are supposed to do things. And she did that. So we rewarded that. And then she did have a narrow framework of progressive policy that she supported. But when she came out and was not a fan of Medicare for all, and when she was siding with Andrew Yang on all these other issues, did that not clue people in? I mean, when somebody tells you who they are, you have to believe them. And
Yes.
we look at what they do, not what they say. So when she kept repeatedly going, yeah, I'm not really a progressive, why would we not have believed her?
Yes, of course. Of course.
So
Like I posted on Twitter yesterday that, you know, Tulsi took the stance of a progressive. You know, she had some interesting ideas, especially at the beginning, right? But, and this is what she said in her video. Basically, she said that, you know, I pretended to be a progressive. I told you I was a progressive. We talked about a few things, but in the end, I decided to forsake you because Joe and I are pals.
right. Everybody becomes buddy when you drop out of a race. And this is part of what I want people to understand, because they see what happens on TV and don't understand what's happening behind the scenes in a political race. So it doesn't matter if it's your city council or presidential race. When you have a bunch of candidates get in, they're in it for a reason, and it's not necessarily to win that election. There are a lot of people who run as a job interview for something else. Sometimes you will have a candidate get an offer from the front runner for someone who wants to be the front runner. If you step down, I will appoint you to this seat. If you step down, I will make you an advisor and I'm going to hire you for this. If you step down, I'm going to introduce you to this other person who is going to get you the connections that you need for X, Y, and Z. Those are the conversations that happen behind the scenes that most people don't realize. So when you had 20 people, well, actually the number was more like 300 people who ran for president this time around. The majority of those people, hell, I'll do it. Run for president just so I can get my own little yard sign.
Yes, it might be a shorter list to list who isn't running for president.
That's exactly right. But then you have those people that the media said were viable. So right, so that's a top 20.
Right.
Of those top 20, you had 3 maybe who really were in it to win. The rest of them were in it for cabinet seats, for book deals, for whatever else, right?
Speaking tours, yes.
Yeah, like Buttigieg, he tried to, he ran for chair of the DNC and lost. So I would expect to see him try again. Now that he has his presidential run, I fully expect that he's going to throw his hat in the ring for the next one and try to become the chair of the DNC. He also has lawsuits and lawyers that he needs to pay off. And I believe a book deal. So that's what's going on behind the scenes. So when Tulsi stepped down, obviously she was in it for a long haul. Andrew Yang, he's now doing just fine on CNN.
Oh yes, of course. Math.
Yes, math. All the maths.
Oh, sorry, I said that wrong. Math.
Right. So I'm not making fun of or diminishing the enthusiasm of the supporters of these candidates, because I believe that their heart was in it and they believed in that campaign. But I want people to take a step back and recognize it's not that your chosen candidate was lying to you. They just know how this works. You haven't been given the cliff notes yet, which is why I hope you will stick with Progressive Insider, because we're going to tell you all this shit and how things actually work, so that the next time you step into a race and you choose your candidate, you're going to put a little bit of a buffer between you, the heart that you wear on your sleeve, and this campaign, so you can see what is the reality of it and put it in its proper perspective. Right.
Exactly. And let's be clear, okay? The progressive movement really is in its infancy, right? It really didn't start in any earnestness until 2016 with Bernie, right? Bernie gave the progressives a voice. He basically, we organized behind his campaign. So anybody that was in politics before that is basically a product of the neoliberal regime, right? So these are all people that play that game, including Liz Warren, including Tulsi Gabbard. All of those people are all product of that, right? It's not until 2016 when certain things were put in place where we told ordinary, everyday, average Joe people that it was okay for them to run for office too. That you can go there and not be corrupted by the system and run as a progressive and run for the betterment and be a public servant instead of a politician, right? So it's not, we shouldn't look for someone of righteousness in a den of thieves from the past. All of those people are all products of that past. It's the new people coming up. It's the Rep Omar. It's Rep Ocasio-Cortez. It's all of these new people that have a skin in the game, that understand, that came from the streets, that came from poor areas, that know what it's like, that have been discriminated against, right? That have seen the underbelly of society, right? You don't have, just because they're called a lawmaker doesn't mean they had to come from lawyers. Right. Which is
right.
Which
well,
is
the
a place of privilege.
Exactly. The one caveat that I would push back just a little is Occupy. So Occupy brought to the forefront a lot of the economic issues that is the foundation of the progressive movement. And even if you want to go back even further, the People's Party, Reverend Barber, MLK. So all of these things have been bubbling under the surface, which is why I'm so upset that the guest that we were having on, Kayla, I really wanted to talk to her because I wanted to have a really good conversation about white privilege and white fragility. And I think that plays into it because you had MLK, you've got Reverend Barber, and you've got these people, but that didn't affect white people. And then
Exactly.
with Occupy, you started to see a congruence of white America with these same issues. And then that was the Occupy movement. And then, you know, the guy who's been shouting in the desert for 30 years, Bernie Sanders, became the focal point for these, you know, the perfect storm of wokeness.
Right.
Where white people finally got a clue that
exactly. Right. It's not, we see time and time again that the change actually doesn't start to become serious. It doesn't start to be serious until the people that are doing the impressing actually want that change, right? It's not the people that are oppressed that demand the change. It's that the people that are doing the oppressing are convinced to change, right?
Yep.
So we always get that.
And I think the point that you're making is you can't, it's not that you can't teach an old dog new tricks. They have no incentive to learn the new tricks. Right. So what we need to be doing is lifting up new voices. And this is why in the organizations that I'm a part of and some others who are like-minded, the number one rule that we want to get added to bylaws and the way that we function is if you're an elected official, and it doesn't matter whether you're elected to dog catcher or county board or whatever, the minute you become elected, you can no longer serve in a leadership role of this organization because we recognize that these two things, sometimes the influence is not a good one because we have all learned bad habits from our elder brothers and sisters in the political party who they themselves are learning, I'm going to get mine. It's okay for a little corruption. It's a necessary evil. We've all heard those phrases. So in order to countermand that, you're right. We do need to raise up new voices, new people, and get them in the right focus.
Right.
So,
Exactly. That's the problem. That's the neoliberal mindset is that you are here to serve me instead of me here to serve you. Right. Like that's the problem, right? Like, look at who's in charge.
mm-hmm. Well,
You know?
yeah. So there are two movie references, and for all my geeky folks who are at home, you'll get this. So you had the Spider-Man movie where the Green Goblin, he said it best. He was talking to Peter Parker, and he said, "Look, some people exist to lift up those of us, with power." So I'm gonna get the quote wrong, and I know a lot of people are gonna, their heads are exploding right now. But the point that you were making, that the slobbering masses exist for the sole purpose of lifting up the few, right? So that's the neoliberal mindset.
Yes.
And then I was rewatching the Avengers, and Captain America said something that I had to stop it, where this was after Thanos had done his deed and half the universe is gone. And Captain America was talking, and he said, as bad as it is, I was driving across the bridge today. He's talking about New York, and the water's clean. And flash forward to Venice today, where you can see the water now in Venice. The dolphins have returned because of coronavirus. And I'm like, oh my God, this is how neoliberals think. This is the maligned argument about overpopulation, which was never true. But we're going to use this to justify, well, it's sad that so many people had to die. And it's so sad that we lost family members. But on the bright side, no, bullshit. There's no excuse for any.
Yeah. Right.
So,
exactly. Well, it's reasonable to say that the coronavirus has done more to fight climate change than human beings ever have.
Yeah. Sad
Right?
truth. So maybe we should take this as the warning that it should be, and change our ways. It obviously wasn't that hard to do. Let's do a 32-hour work week. Let's try that, and see if maybe we can't make some headway.
The world is going to look a lot different when this is done.
I hope you're right. I hope you're right for the better. But all right, Andy, I'm out of coffee.
Yeah, I ran out about 10 minutes ago.
Oh, and you've labored through. Thank you.
Well, we just had so much to talk about that we wanted to go on. Who knows what could happen this weekend?
Hopefully it's steady and we just maintain.
Right.
But for those who join us on Monday, I have a fantastic guest who promises me she will be here. And she is just delightful and sunshiny. And we were talking about, she's a Twitch streamer. And so she plays games for a living, which is amazing in and of itself. But we were talking about the preparation that she has to do to go from her reality to going on a stream and having to be entertaining and happy and getting people distracted from their reality to enjoy just a moment with her and her community. And I think that something like that conversation is so necessary right now.
Absolutely.
Because you can't be stressed 24/7. You just can't.
No, because you got to sleep too.
More than just sleep. But all right, so we're gonna close out, and everybody stay safe, and we'll look forward to having this conversation again Monday morning, same time.
Yeah, take care of yourselves.
All right.
This is Progressive Insider.
Yeah. Progressive insider, you know they wiser. This that new media company covering everything. I'm talking that news.